Hello everyone, today is Tuesday, September 1st, 2020. My name is Evan and welcome back to another midweek market recap video. We're going to dive right into our technicals dashboard. You can see stocks across the board strongly green today. The Nasdaq 100 out in front, leading almost 2% higher to kick off the new month, September 1st. Happy September. And stocks were green across the board. If we look at the 5-day change numbers, the Qs again here really standing out, up 5%. Russell 2000 is still the laggard. This is kind of the same dynamic that we've had now for the past few video updates. The S&P has been kind of in the second place and the Dow right behind following. The major indices all trading above the 10, the 50, and the 200 SMA. And if we scroll down to sectors, we can see technology is at the top of the list, materials at number 2 slot, and communication services number 3. On the downside, we have energy, we have utilities, we have biotech. 2 of those 3 are red. Biotech kind of dancing all over the place. We'll talk about that a little bit later in today's video. The VIX is interestingly getting a pretty good pop here off of the lows. That's something we do want to pay attention to, particularly as markets continue to climb higher. We're now seeing the VIX kind of stubbornly reverse course and move higher as well. So I think that's something we ought to pay attention to. Silver and S&P 500 round out the top 3. On the downside, we have natural gas, we have oil, we have TLT, all of those in the red, anywhere from 0.5% to a little over 2%. So let's jump into the charts. Let's take a look here at our big picture sort of trend outlook. So this is the equity market grid here. We got S&P top left, Nasdaq top right, Russell 2000 bottom left, ACWX, which is the international markets, minus the US in the bottom right. We are looking at these views with just our custom smart trend filter indicators applied. So just a very easy way to measure trend direction and strength. And price itself is the white dashed lines. So if we look here at the weekly time frame, basically the bulls have been on parade here since May in most of these markets, or June in some of the others. But basically we've had kind of this buy signal, this bullish outlook here for all of these markets for the past several months. They continue to really defy gravity, not even just uptrends. I mean, these are in lots of cases historic moves here. These are melt ups that we are seeing here, and just given the fact that they are occurring with very little downside volatility or pullbacks along the way. These have been quite, just a very strong market, and we're still in the same dynamic. There are no changes here to the weekly time frame. Basically, we are still marching higher in all of these markets. If we go down to a daily chart, you can see it's only the Russell 2000 in the bottom left. So again, this has been the weakest of the major indices here, and still you can see it's still been managing to stay bullish with a couple of dings against our trend filter here, which puts it into the neutral zone, but nothing that has convincingly flipped into the other direction. You can see our trend filter is basically caught up with price at this point. So it'd be interesting to see where the IWM kind of goes next. Our past couple of videos, we've been talking about that potential upside rotation. Hasn't panned out yet, hasn't really happened yet, but it's something we can pay attention to. There's some interesting price action today, which let's actually get into right now. So let's move to our candlestick charts, and if we go down to the daily chart for, let's just start with the S&P 500, and we'll hit all the major indices. S&P 500, as we've discussed here, is trading at all-time highs, new all-time closing high today. That means there is no overhead supply to deal with. And for me, the way I look at markets, there's no overhead resistance to really worry about. I know a lot of people like to draw Fibonacci's, and obviously we can draw trend channels from some of these prior points here. So for instance, if you want to look at say this slope here, this channel that has sort of got underway in July. You can see we're just kind of getting to the top end of it right now where we are. So again, this is kind of where price has been, hitting its head against over the past couple of weeks. There's lots of different points you could draw those channels. I'm not going to do all the different levels you could look at because to some degree they're a little subjective, but you can obviously do that to kind of measure the guide and help guide your analysis to where we are in the bigger picture. But to me, there's no overhead supply to deal with. So that means, again, the direction here, the bias is to the upside. And when we look here at the S&P 500, what I like to essentially do is just plot the downside levels where I would want to potentially take action or pay attention to. So the big level I still think is around 3,400. We're getting further away from it each and every day. This, though, is the bigger level where if we were to lose this, that would be a meaningful change of character in my eyes. We're now at this time approximately 4% above that level. So again, a retest back into there, totally reasonable, would be healthy, as I've sort of been saying in lots of these recent videos. Pullbacks here, I think across the board at any point in time would be welcomed, healthy, technically sound, just given the moves that we've seen. So 3,400, that'd be the big level I'd pay attention to. And then you can see we slow down a little bit in here, so you could kind of use some of these recent cluster of lows in here. So for a very short-term level, if we take out a previous day or two's low and we start losing 3,480, 3,490, that might be at least some short-term level you could use to maybe manage risk or change positions, or maybe put on some protection if that's kind of what you're interested in. But for me, looking at the big picture here, this is a time to, try and sit on your hands as best as possible, ride these uptrends. These very powerful uptrends like we're seeing don't come around all that often, and trying to, capitalize on them and participate is very important. So that's the S&P 500. The Russell 2000 here, again, this is a much different picture. So of course, we're not at all-time highs. We're still below the January, February highs from 2020. We have taken out the June pivot high here, and we've essentially been developing sideways here in this channel, in this consolidation for the past, call it 16, 17 trading sessions, so almost a month's calendar time. But we've essentially gone sideways here. We've gone nowhere in the Russell 2000. We are still, again, as our trend filter shows us, in an intermediate term and longer term uptrend. So that is constructive. And kind of the rationale that we've been talking about here is, if we want to see, or if we want to think about ways that this market can continue to move higher, the Russell 2000 is a good spot to, project some rotation and potential breakout moves. It hasn't happened yet, but if we do see the Nasdaq take a breather, if we see the Dow and the S&P slow down a little bit, and the small caps can come into some favor here, this bull market, this overall uptrend in U.S. stocks can certainly continue as long as, IWM, or it'd be great if you saw IWM essentially pick up the slack and break out and start leading. So let's pay attention to, I think today was an interesting day. So yesterday into the end of the month, it was a pretty lousy session for this Russell. Maybe that month end, nobody wanted to show, Russell 2000 exposure on their books because it has basically been, the worst spot on a relative basis to be. So now that the month is over, we're back to a new month. The no selling follow through here, and we just essentially popped right back to the top of this range here. So above 157 starts to get pretty interesting if we can get continuation tomorrow, and then of course it's going to be the upper 150s for a breakout of this longer term range that could really set the the Russell 2000 into motion. So we'll see how this plays out into the end of the week. Last but not least is the Nasdaq 100. Excuse me, the big leading stock to the upside, index to the upside. It is now up. Let's go to our yearly chart here just to get an idea. It's up 41% on the year now. So super, super impressive performance. It's basically, just hasn't taken a breather whatsoever since bottoming out in March. We had a couple of brief periods of sideways consolidations. Otherwise, it's basically been up, up, and to the right. Continues to be that way. It is extended. It is overbought on virtually all sort of metrics. I was going to try and get some studies done, but I just ran out of time for this video on longer term basis on just how much ground this is covered in certain amounts of time. And it's definitely, if it's not breaking records, it's in the top 5 on lots of different ways on just how much ground it's covered. Really resembles the moves. You see the type of move that the Nasdaq's making here, coming off of the 08 or 09 lows, and then back in the 2000s as well. So that's the basic landscape here for the Nasdaq. Again, no overhead supply. So what I like to do is either you can look at the channels like we talked about here. You can try and look at the slopes here at which this has been moving, and you can see like this has basically been the range that we've been in for the past 2 weeks. If we start taking out a prior day's lows, so 292 or so, and start breaking below some near-term structure, that's what I'd be paying attention to. Bigger level is down around 270. So that's the broad outlook there for markets. We're getting some pretty good participation. Just the Russell 2000 that's playing a little hard to get on its move to the upside. If we go to some other markets here, we go to VIX, still in a sell signal on the weekly time frame, but notice here the big pop that this is getting, and on the daily chart, looks like we're going to get our potential first buy signal here in the VIX for for some time. We had this brief stint here in June, which ended up being kind of a false move, so to speak. It just withered out and continued to make lower. The big rally in the VIX, though, of course, was at the end of February, while the market was melting down. So I would expect this to potentially turn up here as early as tomorrow. We'll see if the VIX and this rising VIX here, or this new regime of VIX, ends up playing a role and spills into the markets. I do think it's something we want to pay attention to. It might finally say that we're ready for some type of pullback here. If we continue to see the VIX rising while equity markets rising, eventually something is going to give there, and my money would probably be on the VIX on at least getting a 2 to 5 to 7% shakeout in lots of the major indices. Timing of that, again, I sort of get asked it all the time every week. I don't know. So right now, again, my stance here is to just ride the uptrends for as long as they're going. But I think this information here and what the VIX is doing is certainly interesting. If we look at TLT, it's been in a sell signal for a few weeks now. You can see it's getting back up to its trend filter. So, getting close to back to, testing some important levels, but it's been in a downtrend, continues to be in a downtrend. On the weekly chart, however, it's still kind of holding on to this yellow transition phase. Haven't got a red dot printed there yet. So the jury's still sort of out, but TLT certainly seeing some mixed, some mixed signals there. Gold, silver, both still in uptrends. USO in green buy signal here as well. Same thing with commodities. On the daily chart for all these instruments, you can see GLD is still chopping around in its neutral state. We talked about that last week on our weekend video. Silver back to a buy signal here as of Monday. And again, USO, DBC, all pretty much the same. So a couple of individual sectors I wanted to mention. First is biotech. So biotech, we've talked a lot about this, and basically looking at this, and we talked a lot about healthcare too. So healthcare a little more broad, but essentially healthcare just moved sideways for such a long period. It tried to break out the past couple of days. Now it's coming back to earth. IBB was in a more of a sliding sort of stance here, and it had a good finish to the month, which was actually surprising given the fact that it was pretty much a dog for August, and one of the worst places to be for August on a relative basis. It had a very strong yesterday, and then it gave it all back today on Tuesday on a slight uptick in volume here. So IBB still an interesting spot. I still certainly have exposure in individual names here. Still like the location of this to find a bid here. I think this is an interesting spot for IBB, and I'm still overall bullish on it, but it's certainly, taking its sweet time on trying to find some lows. If it starts losing 130 or so convincingly, then, certainly the stance is going to change there on the general outlook. If we look at XLE, this started to roll over. We got this sell signal on Friday, which we talked about. This has continued to roll over a little bit. It's getting back towards the bottom end of this range here. So I think XLE is going to be in an interesting spot for the buyers. If it starts losing 34, low 34s, then this is going to be in trouble here. So let's pay attention to XLE. And finally, XLU, which again, we talked about on Friday being in the sell signal, has continued to sort of weaken up here. It's back to this recent cluster of lows. It's gone nowhere for 4 or 5 months, but it is, basically looking like it wants to make maybe a trip back down to the lower end of this range. So that's something that we ought to pay attention to. So that's it. That is kind of the the midweek update. We've got stocks again still defying gravity. We've got some good participation out there, waiting on small caps, and we even got some we even got the bond market or the bond proxy ETFs starting to rally a bit. That's TLT, which has seen a lot of selling recently, or a flare up of selling in the past several weeks, but starting to get a little bit of a rebound here in bonds, which is interesting as well. So that's what I got. Thanks as always for tuning in and watching. Every Tuesday we do videos like this. Tomorrow we'll be back with some trade ideas, and then Friday is our long form market recap. Thanks so much for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to stay up to date with the videos. And I'm curious, what are you watching this week so far? Anything that has your attention? Anything that I missed? Let me know in the comments below. Love to see what everybody else is watching.